In the Northern Rain Gallery, beneath the high windows of the old archive, the stone floor has taken on the cool, silver breath of night. Outside, the rain has softened the city until its lamps seem farther away than they are, blurred into small, patient stars below the glass. A low table waits near the wall. A lamp burns with a quiet amber circle, and an old map of northern Greece lies open beneath it, its faded ridges rising gently from the paper, as though the mountains themselves have been sleeping there for years. Nothing in this room presses forward. The rain keeps its own slow rhythm above the windows. The lamp keeps its own small circle across the table. The walls, dark with age and patient with silence, seem to remember every quiet hour that has passed through them and every page that has ever been opened here after dusk. The body does not need to follow anything quickly tonight. It only needs to settle, to breathe, and to let the story arrive at the same unhurried pace as rain on old glass. Near the center of the map, written in a dark ink softened by time, there is a name that still carries more than one kind of height: Olympus. Not loud, not blazing, not demanding attention, but simply resting there, beside the pale lines of valleys and roads, as if the word had been waiting for the room to become quiet enough to read it properly. For the ancient Greeks, Olympus was never only a mountain. It was stone and cloud, memory and worship. A real place beneath weather, and an imagined realm above it. Below, there were forests, ravines, limestone slopes, narrow ledges, cold air, and summits often hidden by cloud. Above, in the oldest songs, there was a place of brightness, a cloudless realm beyond ordinary wind and rain, where the gods gathered in halls that weather could not touch. And so tonight, the journey does not climb in haste. It begins here, with a map, a lamp, a room made safe by darkness, and the body allowed to become still, while an old mountain slowly returns to story. On the page, Mount Olympus rises between the lowlands of Thessaly and the region once known as Macedonia, close enough to the sea that the eastern light can find it, high enough that the upper clouds often keep it partly veiled. Its highest summit, Medicus, reaches nearly 2,917 meters above the sea, the tallest point in Greece. But in the quiet of the gallery, the number is only a small measure, a gentle reminder that even the largest myths often begin with ordinary stone, lifted slowly into view by time. The mountain is not a single smooth height. It is folded into ridges, gullies, gorges, and more than 50 separate peaks rising together like a great ancient knot of pale rock and dark forest. From below, it does not reveal itself all at once. One ridge hides another. One cloud closes over a summit. One green slope rises into another kind of green, until the trees grow sparse and the upper world begins to feel near, though still carefully withheld from the eye. Long before any poet placed a shining hall above those ridges, the rock itself had already lived through an age beyond memory. In a warm sea that no longer exists, layers of pale limestone settled grain by grain onto the floor of the ancient Tethys. Slowly, over a stretch of time too wide for ordinary thought, those quiet layers drifted on the moving plates of the earth. When land pressed against land, the old seabed folded upward, lifted from the vanished water, and became the mountain that would one day be called the home of the gods. There is comfort in that slowness. Before the names, before the hymns, before the quarrels of gods and titans, the mountain was already being prepared by silence. Stone gathered itself, without knowing what stories would later rest upon it. Sea floor became cliff. Sediment became summit. The earth kept its own patient diary, in layers and fractures, indifferent to which divine household human voices would someday imagine above its highest clouds. The room in the gallery seems to understand this patience, holding the map beneath the lamp without asking the hand to move. The rain has grown lighter now, falling with more space between each drop. The map does not stir. The edge of the paper lies flat beneath a small bronze weight, and the flame of the lamp leans neither left nor right. There is no need to climb the mountain tonight. The mind may rise only as far as the words carry it, then return again to the warmth of the small room, to the breath moving in and out, to the simple knowledge that the page will wait exactly where it is. At the lower slopes of Olympus, life gathers thickly and warmly. Shrubs, broad leaves, and fragrant herbs hold close to the villages and fields, releasing their scent only when brushed by a passing breeze or a careful hand. Higher up, the forest deepens. Beech and fir stand in cooler shade, their trunks close together, their branches gathering the dim green light of mountain air. Higher still, a dark and resinous pine clings to ledges and rocky shelves, as though some trees were made not for soft ground, but for the narrow patience of stone. Above the last forests, where the timberline gives way to bare rock and thin air, the life of the mountain becomes smaller and quieter. Alpine flowers keep low against the wind. Pale blossoms appear in sheltered places and vanish again with the season. Grasses hold close to the ground. Snow lingers long after the valleys have warmed. Wild goats move along ledges that seem too narrow to accept them, and the mountain chamois picks its way through shadowed folds of rock with a calm that belongs to creatures who have never doubted the path beneath their feet. In the old imagination, this layered ascent of plants and animals became a kind of natural stairway. The lower slopes belonged to the human world, to paths, pastures, springs, and smoke rising from houses at evening. The middle forests belonged to shade, rustling leaves, and hidden movement. The upper slopes belonged to wind and cloud, where the eye could no longer count on seeing clearly. And above that, where the highest points vanished into mist, it was easy to imagine that another kind of world began, one the ordinary foot was not meant to enter. A mountain often hidden by cloud is already half a secret. At dawn, Olympus may appear rose-colored and soft, as if it has been made from the first light of the day. At noon, it may turn severe and bright, all stone and distance. By evening, it can become only a dark shape beneath the first stars, while the summit disappears entirely behind weather. Human eyes look upward, find a veil, and the mind completes what the mist conceals. In the oldest poetic memory, Olympus was not described as a place that could be reached by a determined climb. It was a region above disturbance, a home of the gods, where winds did not shake the halls, where rain did not fall, where snow could not approach, and where clear brightness spread across the upper air. This was not the weather of the mountain as travelers knew it. It was the weather of permanence, the atmosphere of immortality imagined as calm, steady, and unbroken. That cloudless Olympus gave the ancient mind a way to place order above change. Down below, people lived with storms, harvests, illness, longing, family quarrels, sudden losses, and the uncertain turning of years. But above, in the poem, there was a realm that did not tremble with every season. It held the gods at a distance, not to make them cold tonight, but to make them old shapes of meaning, softened by time and kept safely in story. The name itself seemed to carry brightness. Ancient ears sometimes heard in Olympus the suggestion of shining, as though to speak the word was already to lift the face towards something lit from within. Whether stone peak or poetic heaven, Olympus became less a single address than a meeting place between the visible and the invisible. One kind of height could be measured in steps. The other could not be measured at all. Yet over centuries, slowly and naturally, the two heights came to rest upon one another. The lamp in the gallery has lowered a little, its light warmer now, more amber than gold. The map case beside it has brass corners worn smooth by years of careful hands. The clay cup near the lamp holds no steam, only a dark reflection of the flame. Somewhere deeper in the archive, the air carries the faint scent of damp wool, old paper, and mountain pine. Though no branch has ever grown in this room, the body has already begun to understand the hour. The shoulders sink without being asked. Long before the gods of Olympus gathered at their table, the old stories told of a different order. In the beginning, the sky and the earth were imagined as first parents. A wide sky stretched endlessly above a broad and patient earth. From their union came the Titans, ancient children of enormous force and deep titles, keepers of ocean, memory, law, heavenly lights, and the first arrangements of the world. They belonged to an older age, before the word Olympian had settled into its later meaning, before the shining halls had been built above the cloud line. The story of how the younger gods came to rule is often told with thunder and struggle. But here, in the quiet of the sleeping archive, it can be heard more softly. The old order held too tightly to what it feared losing. The new order waited in hiding until it was strong enough to return. A child sheltered in a mountain cave grew in secret, protected by stone, goat's milk, honey, and the careful loyalty of those who understood that not every future should be announced too early. That hidden child was Zeus. When he was grown, the story says he returned to his father's hall and released his brothers and sisters from the darkness, where they had been kept away from the world. One by one, they came back into the light. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each carried the silence of long waiting, and each became part of the younger generation that would challenge the old. The tale moved toward conflict. But beneath it, there was another movement too. The slow turning of one age into another. For 10 long years, the old powers and the new stood opposed. The younger gods made their stand upon the slopes that would one day be named for them, while the elder titans held their own ground nearby. Yet even this long contest can be softened by distance. The old poems remember not only force, but endurance. A world changing hands is rarely quick. It is a slow pressure, a long weather, a season that seems not to end until, at last, something deep gives way, and the next order becomes possible. When the quarrel finally settled, the defeated titans were led into the deepest keeping of the earth, a place called Tartaros, far below the roots of the mountain. Some older powers who had stayed apart from the struggle continued their quiet work, as rivers, lights, and measures of the world often do, untouched by whichever family happens to rule above. And on the mountain's heights, the younger gods turned toward the work of building a home worthy of the peace they had won. In the gallery, the rain has thinned almost to mist. A single drop moves slowly down the high glass, leaving a wavering line through the reflection of the lamp. No footstep crosses the stone floor. No door opens from the deeper archive. The old quarrel on the page has already lost its sharpness. It becomes only a shape in time, a reminder that even myths of power can eventually grow quiet when carried carefully enough through the night. The divine halls of Olympus were imagined not as a single fortress, but as a bright acropolis spread across the upper ridges, a village of immortal houses set beyond the reach of storm. The builder was Hephaestus, god of fire and metalwork, a patient craftsman whose skill gave form to what ordinary hands could only dream. In his bronze-walled workshop, the great bellows breathed fire when he needed them, and the anvil, worn smooth by centuries of striking, held the memory of every impossible thing he had shaped. From that forge came palaces of gold, silver, bronze, and pale stone. Their foundations were sunk deep into the mountain, so firm that no force was thought able to loosen them. Each god had a dwelling suited to the nature of the one who lived there. A hall with lunar quiet for the goddess of the hunt, a warmer hearth-centered house for the goddess who kept the sacred fire, bright chambers for gods of music, craft, marriage, wisdom, road, sea, and sky. None of the houses needed to compete for height. The mountain had already given them height enough. At the center stood the hall of Zeus, its floor imagined as gold, wide enough to gather the divine council and open enough for starlight to cross its polished stones. For all its brightness, the old description carries a certain simplicity. A great central space, private chambers beyond, storerooms along the back, a courtyard open to the upper light. Less a fortress than a room made vast, built not for hurry, not for defense, but for long assemblies, deep feasts, and the slow repetition of immortal evenings. Hephaestus filled that world with wonders that feel strangely peaceful from far away. Golden attendants, shaped by craft and given the grace of movement and speech, assisted him in the forge. Self-moving tripods rolled quietly to the feasts of the gods and returned again when their work was done. Tonight, these marvels do not clatter or dazzle. They move as if in a dream of service and order, wheels turning soundlessly across polished floors, cups carried gently, doors opening without effort. Everything needed arriving at exactly the right time. At the edge of that upper world stood the cloud gates, the threshold where ordinary weather ended and the clear realm began. These gates were watched by the Horai, the Hours, goddesses of orderly time and proper arrival. They were not merely guards, they belonged to rhythm, to the rightness of a door opening at the moment it should open, and resting closed when the hour has passed. When a god descended to earth, the Hours drew the cloud aside. When that god returned, they folded the veil closed again. There is a soft teaching hidden in those cloud gates. A world held together only by power would never feel restful. But a world held together by rhythm can become calm. Clouds gather, then thin. The year turns, then returns. The gate opens, then closes. The song rises, then fades. Even a divine realm needs thresholds. Even heaven needs the gentle discipline of timing. Even the mind, after a long day, can be allowed to close its gates one by one. The lamp on the table has been burning at this same low height for some time. Its circle no longer reaches every corner of the map, but it reaches enough. The inked ridges of Olympus remain visible near the center. The hand that once traced them has withdrawn. Nothing in the room needs adjusting. The body remains supported and unhurried. The story itself seems to breathe now, in and out, like rain returning to the roof, like cloud resting on the mountain, like sleep approaching without announcement. Inside the cloud gates, the gods were remembered as a household, a court, and an assembly. The great circle of Olympian deities, often called the 12, gave the Greek world a way to organize the overwhelming forces of existence. Sky and sea, harvest and craft, wisdom and music, love and road, hearth and messenger, moon and sun, all took symbolic places around the divine table. The exact list could shift with region and tradition, as living religions often shift. But the idea of the gathered 12 gave the imagination a calm architecture. Zeus sat at the center, as lord of the bright sky and keeper of order. Hera held the dignity of marriage, household binding, and royal presence. Poseidon carried the sea's deep motion and the sudden tremor of earth. Demeter brought the slow turning of grain, fields, and the agricultural year. Apollo held music, healing, prophecy, and the warmth of clear light. Artemis kept wild hills, moonlit paths, animals, and the independent spaces beyond the village edge. Ares stood for the force of conflict, acknowledged because life could not pretend such force did not exist. Aphrodite carried beauty, attraction, and the strange soft power that draws beings toward one another. Athena came with wisdom, craft of the mind, and the discipline of strategy. Hermes moved between places, carrying messages along roads and thresholds. Hephaestus gave the world skill, metal, and patient making. And near the center, quietly essential, Hestia kept the hearth. Among all these figures, Hestia may be the most restful tonight. She does not need to cross the sky or shake the sea. She does not need to enter myths with great drama. Her power is the center fire, the household flame, the warmth around which both mortal and divine life can gather. Where others travel, Hestia remains. Her stillness is not emptiness, it is steadiness. It is the old truth that every grand hall, even one imagined above the clouds, needs a gentle fire at its heart. In the hall of Olympus, the feast began not as a burst of noise, but as a ritual of steadiness. Nectar was poured, a golden warmth in the old imagination, not quite like mortal wine, not clouding the mind, but deepening the brightness of those who drank it. Ambrosia was set before each guest, the food of immortality, less a reward than a quiet maintenance of divine being. Meal by meal, cup by cup, the gods remained what they were, held against the fading that touched every mortal thing below. From this great distance, immortality does not need to be envied. It can become only a pale idea in an old poem, a way ancient peoples spoke about what does not fade. The gods themselves could be tired, grieved, angered, wounded by pride or longing, caught in the old net of family and memory. But the feast restored their brightness. It returned them to their places. It let the upper world continue, not through urgency, but through repetition, nourishment, and return. While the cups were passing and the hall warmed around its golden floor, Apollo took up his lyre. The music in the old accounts seems less like performance and more like a quality of the air itself, something that arrives without needing to announce itself and settles over everything in the room. The muses answered from their remembered slopes, voices threading through the upper air like silver through cloth, until the hall seemed not louder, but more whole, the way a room feels when the proper fire has finally been lit. The rain outside the gallery has almost passed. The old bindings along the wall have taken in the damp and released a faint, earthy sweetness. The cup beside the lamp reflects only a small, trembling point of light. The names of the gods are far away now, softened into the margins of the page. They are no longer figures of command, only old presences arranged around a golden table in a story that has become gentle enough for rest. The mountain below the gods remained sacred, not because every person climbed it, but because people approached it. For a long time, reverence took the form of drawing near, rather than reaching the top. In the foothills and plains, sanctuaries grew around springs, stones, trees, and open places where the height of Olympus could be felt without needing to be entered. To stand at the base of what could not be possessed was already a kind of participation. To look upward was already to take part in the old relationship between earth and sky. Far from the summit, in a wooded valley, the sanctuary of Dodona kept one of the oldest ways of listening for Zeus. There, among ancient oak trees, the answer to a question was sought not in a blaze or command, but in the movement of leaves. Wind passed through branches, bronze vessels murmured. Priests and priestesses listened for meaning in the rustle of the grove. It is a quiet image, and a useful one, for sleep wisdom not shouted from the sky, but carried in small sounds that require stillness before they can be heard. Kings and travelers, villagers and pilgrims, later Greeks, and later Romans, all found their own ways to honor the mountain and the stories around it. Names changed, languages shifted. Old sanctuaries slowly grew quiet as generations passed. The sacred fires were not so much extinguished as allowed to burn down and not be relit. Grass entered the old enclosures. Stones settled back into the earth. The mountain itself did not grieve or triumph. It simply continued to hold cloud, tree, animal, spring, and rock, as it had always done. What came next was not silence, but a different kind of presence. In later centuries, Christian monks were drawn to the deep gorges and sheltered ravines of Olympus, where the rock walls rose close together and the mountain streams kept in unhurried sound. They built monasteries in places suited to distance, contemplation, and patient work. The old divine Acropolis had receded into cloud, but the mountain's invitation to stillness remained. Different prayers entered the gorges. The same stone walls listened. For most of recorded history, the true summit had not been reached by any person known to have written about it afterward. The clouds, the difficulty of the upper rock, and the old sense of sacred distance all kept the peak apart. Then, on an August morning in 1913, two Swiss climbers, Daniel Bode-Bovy and Frederick Boissonnas, with a local guide named Christos Kakalos, stood on Mythicus. The summit that had once seemed entirely withheld became a place a human foot could touch. And still the mountain lost none of its silence. A reached summit is not always a conquered one. Sometimes it is simply a new form of attention. From the top of Olympus, on a clear day, the Aegean can catch light far to the east, and the lowlands can spread below like a patient map. The old cloudless realm may not be found there in any literal way, but the feeling that made people imagine it can still be understood. To stand above ordinary paths, seeing further than daily life allows, is enough to teach the mind why height so often becomes meaning. Today, Olympus is protected as a living landscape, not only remembered as a mythic one. It became Greece's first national park in the 20th century and was later recognized as a biosphere reserve. The modern language of care is different from the language of hymns, but it carries its own reverence. Rare plants, dark pines, ravines, birds, wild goats, chamois, cold streams, and alpine flowers all continue their quiet work beneath the changing clouds. What was once given to gods is also given now to preservation. Perhaps this is why Olympus endures so gently in the mind. It is not only a throne above the clouds, it is also a mountain that casts a shadow. Not only a palace of gods, but a slope where trees grow according to altitude. Not only the home of Zeus in the old songs, but a protected landscape of roots, stones, rain, and fragile flowers. It belongs to poetry and geology, to myth and ecology, to the ancient need for meaning and the present need for care. Even the word has traveled beyond the mountain. When the modern Olympic Games were revived, a related brightness moved outward into stadiums, ceremonies, flames, and gatherings. The old idea of a height shared by many people changed shape once more. It no longer belonged only to a clouded summit or a divine hall. It became a symbol carried from place to place, a small portable piece of the old radiance, crossing the world in human hands. In the northern rain gallery, the map grows dimmer. The inked line of Olympus is still visible, but only barely. The name no longer rises from the page. It rests inside it. The lamp has drawn its circle close, and the high windows hold only the last, soft traces of rain. Somewhere beyond the walls, the archive continues into deeper rooms, but none of them call tonight. The story has found its resting place. The mountain remains far away beyond the window, beyond the city, beyond the reach of the little lamp, holding all its old shapes without effort. Pale limestone remembers the ancient seabed it once was. Dark pines cling to ledges. Clouds gather and thin at the summit's edge. The gorges keep the sound of water. The old sanctuaries sleep under grass. The monasteries wait in ravines. The high peaks stand in their permanent patience, requiring nothing from the night. The cloud gates are closed now, not against anyone, but simply because the hour has grown late and every threshold deserves to rest. The 12 chairs stand quiet in the hall above the weather. The nectar has long since been poured. The golden tripods have returned to their corners. The lyre rests where it was set down. The hours sit at the boundary between the ordinary world and whatever lies above it, unhurried and unconcerned with the number of centuries passing around them. The night archivist places a narrow ribbon at the edge of the map, not to mark a discovery, only to let the page sleep where it is. Paper touches paper with a sound softer than the last rain. The brass corners of the map case catch one final thread of lamplight and then grow dark again. Nothing in the room needs to be seen any further. No edge needs to be found. No arrangement needs to be checked. Everything is already exactly where it belongs. Outside, the rain has passed into silence. Inside, the stone is cool. The body is quiet. The story has arrived at its proper end. Stone returns to stone. Cloud returns to cloud. The old gods return to memory. The mountain holds them all without effort, as it has for longer than any telling can measure. The lamp gives one last small glow to the sleeping map, then settles into darkness. The breath continues its patient work in the dark, in and all the way down, and out, and down again. Each exhale carries the body a little further from the room, a little deeper beneath thought, into the particular rest that comes when a long and careful story no longer needs to move forward. The next page can wait. The next sound can wait. The next thought is already softer than a thought. Sleep is already here, and Olympus, in its permanent and unhurried dark, holds the rest.